Hello and welcome to Frontrunner Motorsport. A few weeks ago we began our look at every Brabham Formula 1 driver ever, listing them from worst to best. Today we are doing the middle part of this trilogy, the drivers from 28th to 16th, the kind of did alright drivers. So make sure you go back and watch part 1 to catch up, or maybe watch again to remind yourself who was on that list. Then after subscribing to the channel, watch this video. With that, let's jump right in. 28. Elio De Angelis. The signing of Italian Elio De Angelis was a coup for the Brabham team. By the time he joined Brabham in 1986, he already had 7 years in Formula 1 behind him and had taken 2 wins with Lotus, finishing 3rd and 5th overall in the 2 previous years. Elio had got his start with Cado in 1979, but joined Lotus in 1980, took his first win at the Austrian Grand Prix in 1982, patiently stayed with the team through an atrocious 1983, and took a win at Imola in 1985. Sadly, he only got 4 races for Brabham before being killed at a test session at Paul Ricard after a rear ring failure. Unfortunately, none of these would be very successful drives, with an 8th place and 3 retirements due to the hideously unreliable BMW engine. Elio De Angelis was the youngest driver to get a Formula 1 podium after taking 2nd in the 1980 Brazilian Grand Prix, a record he held until Ralf Schumacher replaced him 17 years later. 27. Cado Fabi. You'll notice that most of the drivers so far did very few races for Brabham. That is also true of Cado Fabi. Cado Fabi was hired by Brabham to race in the Grand Prix brother Cado Fabi couldn't race in due to his commitments to the kart series in America. Cado had 1 season of Formula 1 with Osella in 1983, but would only appear 3 times for Brabham in 1984. The usual reliability problems saw him retire at the Monaco and Canadian Grand Prix, but he put in a good drive to 7th at the Dallas Grand Prix, where he even outqualified his teammate, Nelson Piquet. Whilst older brother Tio would race until the mid-90s, Cado quit racing to take care of the family business. 26. Warwick. The man who replaced Elio De Angelis after his fatal accident, apparently because he was one of the few unemployed drivers not to phone up asking for De Angelis' job whilst his body was still warm. Warwick joined for the rest of the 1986 season, and it was a terrible year, with reliability being the biggest enemy. This was the first season since his time with Tolman back in 1982 that Warwick failed to score points, with a best 7th at the British Grand Prix. Warwick left for Arrows at year's end and spent a few years there before doing a season with Lotus, leaving Formula 1 for a successful time in World Sports Car Championship and returning for a single season with Footwork in 1993, later finishing his career in sports cars and touring car racing. 25. Andrea De Cesaris. Given that Andrea De Cesaris had a reputation for crashing and the Brabham cars had a reputation for breaking down, it was a surprise De Cesaris ever finished a race for the team. Well, he did. Twice. In 16 races. He did get a podium, however. 3rd place at the 1987 Belgian Grand Prix. These would be the only points he would score in his single Brabham season. De Cesaris even retired from 12 races in a row, but in his defence, that was due to Brabham's woeful reliability. Having already raced for Alfa Romeo, McLaren, Ligier and Minardi, his move to Brabham would begin a slide down the grid with Real, BMS Scuderia, Tyrrell, Jordan and Sauber. But the Italian had a very long Formula 1 career, from the 1980 Canadian Grand Prix to his final race at the 1994 European Grand Prix. His 1 season at Brabham is best not remembered. 24. Ricardo Zenino. The Argentinian was never more than a substitute driver who got his start through an enormous piece of luck. He happened to attend the 1979 Canadian Grand Prix when Niki Lauda quit the Brabham team and Formula 1. The 1979 British F1 champion Ricardo Zenino was selected to take his place. He never scored points, but seeing as he only had 9 races, he did a pretty good job. 7th on his debut and 7th at the 1980 Argentine Grand Prix. He was replaced halfway through 1980 by Hector Rebecca, and outside of 2 Tyrrell drives in 1981, would not get another chance in Formula 1. When the Falklands War started, unfortunately sponsorship for Ricardo Zenino ran out, and his motor racing career was basically over. 23. Yakan Rin. Formula 1's only posthumous champion, Yakan Rin, raced for the Brabham team in 1968 after a few relatively successful years with the Cooper team. Rin had finished 3rd overall in 1966 behind John Surtees and Jack Brabham, but had still never won a race. He wouldn't win for Brabham either, only taking a couple of podiums but being let down by poor reliability. As you can see, that was a problem in every era for the team. He left Brabham after a single year and joined Lotus, taking his first win in 1969 and the championship in 1970, before sadly being killed in a crash at Monza that wouldn't stop him becoming champion. Number 22, Andrea De Alessi. For someone who had a brief time in Formula 1, Andrea De Alessi has a habit of appearing on these lists. Having started his time in Formula 1 with McLaren and Ferrari, De Alessi had dropped down to first March and then Team Surtees, but made his final 5 Formula 1 appearances for the Brabham team. 4th place at Zolder, followed by 7th at Monaco along with 3 retirements, was all that De Alessi managed. But they were some decent performances for a part-time driver in a slow Brabham car. He was injured in a mass crash at the British Grand Prix, and that was enough to force him into retirement. He is considered to be the Murray Walker of Italian commentary, according to one Reddit post I found, and has been heavily involved with the N Technology team. Number 21, Mark Blondell. Journeyman Mark Blondell was another victim of Brabham's decline. Despite not having a lot of success on his way up to Formula 1 outside of a couple of Formula 4 championships, Blondell debuted with Brabham in 1991. As you can imagine, within the last lights of day for the team, it was a tough year with a single point for Blondell at the Belgian Grand Prix, even failing to qualify for a couple of races. Blondell would miss Formula 1 for 1992, winning for 24 hours of Le Mans with Peugeot, instead before returning with Ligier, Tyrrell and McLaren. After Formula 1 he raced in the kart series in America, before winding down his career into the new millennium. Number 20, Wilson Fittipaldi. The less well-known of the Fittipaldi brothers, the older Fittipaldi brothers that is, I think it's fair to say Wilson Fittipaldi was the less desirable of the two, but he debuted with Brabham in 1972, the same year Emerson won his first Formula 1 title. Wilson, meanwhile, scored no points. He stayed with the team for 1973 and did better, 3 points scored and he finished a lot more races. After skipping 1974, he returned with his own team, sponsored by Brazilian sugar daddies Copersucar, in 1975, and soon after retired from racing to concentrate on team management, hiring his brother Emerson, whilst arguably he was still in his prime. The team survived until 1982, but Wilson continued to be involved with motorsport, including managing his son Christian's racing career. Number 19, Graham Hill. So to the second of the Hills on this list. Shame Phil Hill never raced for Brabham. You might be surprised to see a Formula 1 legend like Graham Hill down so far low on this list, but he had his success with BRM and Lotus, and joined Brabham towards the tail end of his time in Formula 1. Graham Hill's 2 seasons at Brabham were very disappointing. The double champion only scored 6 points in 2 seasons, finishing in the points just 4 times, never higher than 5th. It was a time of upheaval for the team, with the retirement of Jack Brabham, and the team changing ownership around that time also. Graham would add the 24 Hours of Le Mans to his Indy 500 win, and Formula 1 championships, Tasman Series wins and his class championship in the British Saloon Cars. He started his own team, Embassy Hill, in 1973, and this would see out his time in Formula 1, and sadly his life, as he was killed in a plane crash along with several others on the way back from testing in France. He never got to see his son Damon follow in his footsteps. Number 18, Tim Schenken. The Australian had won the British Formula 3 Championship in 1968, along with a few other accolades, and was soon racing in the peak of single-seaters and sports car racing. After a few races with Frank Williams in 1970, he joined Brabham for the 1971 season. It wasn't great, he didn't score at most races, but he did get a podium at the Austrian Grand Prix and scored points in Germany. It was not enough for him to be kept on, and he would get the honour of being the only guy to drive a Trojan Formula 1 car. He also raced for Team Surtees, but his time in Formula 1 was short, and he would continue his career in sports car racing and in Australian motorsport, being involved with Formula 1 as a clerk of the course for the Australian Grand Prix. Number 17, Mark Surer. The Swiss driver had his best Formula 1 season with Brabham. Mark Surer spent his early F1 career jumping between backmarker teams, such as Team Ensign and ATS, before spending a few years with Arrows. It was with Arrows that he linked up with BMW and got the gig for 1 season at Brabham. I say it was his best season, but he did only score 5 points. Most of the time he was just outside the points positions, and unlike a lot of these drivers, he wasn't badly affected by reliability, only retiring from 4 races. He was a fair way behind teammate Nelson Piquet, but even Piquet didn't have a stellar year. Mark Surer left Brabham and did a few more races for Arrows, before a rallying crash ended his racing career. An academic study in 2016 laid an argument for him being the 17th greatest Formula 1 driver of all time, and I can see it. A decent driver who was let down by poor machinery. Number 16, Cado Fabi. The final driver of part 2 is Cado Fabi, brother of previously mentioned Cado Fabi. You'll notice there are a lot of Italians on this part of the list, and that is because most of these drivers raced for the team in the 80s when Brabham had Italian sponsors. Cado Fabi is yet another Italian who had a weird season with Brabham in 1984. He split his time between Formula 1 and the kart series in America, but after a mediocre time in both series, he ditched America for Formula 1 and saw a steady improvement in results. All for naught as he was dropped at year's end. He retired from 8 of his 12 starts, but did nab a podium in Detroit. He'd finished his Formula 1 career with Tolman and Benetton before heading back to America, where he was a decent midfield runner, also grabbing a couple of podiums at Le Mans. So that is the second part of the worst to best Brabham Formula 1 drivers ever list. Make sure you subscribe so you don't miss part 3. Hopefully it won't take as long to come out as this part, which was delayed once again by illness. Pretty sure I had whooping cough, smallpox and the bubonic plague. Leave your thoughts down below, any drivers you agree or disagree with. Who do you think will be number 1? Thank you everyone who has subscribed recently and to everyone watching. Have a good one.